Imagine a crown heavier than iron, its weight not only of gold, but of endless suspicion and peril. A throne carved from cold stone, soaked through with betrayal and whispered plots. Every decision a potential spark for war. Every celebration a chance for a poisoner's blade to strike unseen. In the flickering torchlight, a lone king stands atop battlements, rain lashing his velvet cloak as shadows dance around him. The jeweled crown presses into his brow, the rings biting like chains. Around him, courtiers whisper in shadowed corridors, their eyes darting anxiously to every corner, wary of unseen threats. The cold clank of armor echoes off marble floors, mingling with the sharp temps of spilled wine and blood in the great hall. Beneath vaulted ceilings, a heartbeat drums, steadily a warning, a signal that danger is never far. Tonight, we strip away the gilded surface to reveal why the medieval crown was often less a symbol of glory and more a heavy curse. The pre-dawn gloom hangs heavy over the mist-shrouded keep, casting long shadows across cold stone walls. Within his solitary solar, King Aldric paces restlessly, his gaunt face marked by sleepless nights. His sleeve, stained with ink from countless hours of council papers and sweat from the weight of rule, clings to a clenched fist. Outside, distant echoes ripple through the empty halls, a drip of water, the faint rustle of restless servant Siet inside. Silence presses down like a shroud. The heavy burden of kingship is palpable in every measured step. A sudden knock breaks the stillness. Sir Eamon the Chamberlain enters, his hands steady but eyes betraying unease. He carries a sealed letter and a dagger darkened with fresh blood. The king's fingers tremble as he breaks the wax seal, revealing a message soaked in brutality. The severed head of his own brother, sent as a grim tribute from a rebellious baron. The dagger drips silently onto the stone floor, mirroring the tightening grip Aldric holds as his jaw hardens, the room thick with unspoken dread. Kneeling before the king, Sir Eamon's voice falters, recounting the kingdom's dire plight. The people starve, the coffers are bare, and ruthless demands echo through the land. Tribute or the king's life? Aldric's eyes burned with a fierce, unyielding resolve as he grips the dagger's hilt tighter, the weight of impending decisions pressing down upon him like the cold stone arches surrounding them. In a moment of quiet torment, Aldric's crown slips from his fingers, tumbling in slow motion across the floor, its torchlit jewels flashing briefly before resting in shadow. Alone beneath the vaulted arches, the tolling church bell reverberates. Some pray for salvation, others for vengeance. Whispering to the empty hall, the king asks, "Is this power?" The bell fades, leaving only silence. The glass-walled corner office glows sharply against the night sky, city lights blazing endlessly as monitors flicker with streams of stock tickers and financial data. Outside, the metropolis hums with ceaseless activity. But inside this isolated tower, the atmosphere is quiet, almost oppressive. The modern throne is no longer carved from stone or draped in velvet. It is glass and steel, illuminated by artificial light that never truly dims. Here, power pulses through digital signals, and the relentless pace of a 24/7 economy sets the rhythm. In the corner, the CEO sits rigidly, posture tense, and eyes reddened from hours of scrutinizing spreadsheets and making decisions that ripple across markets. A cold espresso rests untouched nearby, its bitter aroma mingling with the sterile air. Every twitch of a finger tapping on the desk betrays the stress beneath the polished exterior. The weight of responsibility is etched in the tight jawline and furrowed brow. This is a modern vigilance marked by exhaustion and unyielding demands. Statistics underscore this reality. 76% of executives admit to checking emails well past midnight. tethered to their devices long after others have gone to sleep. Leadership burnout is a growing crisis, with CEOs facing anxiety rates 60% higher than their employees. Nearly half confess they would gladly sacrifice salary for a chance to work fewer hours, revealing a cost often hidden beneath success. These numbers tell a story of achievement shadowed by personal sacrifice, yet, beneath these sleek offices and digital empires lie thorns sharper than any sword. The crown may have transformed from iron and jewels to status and stock options, but its weight remains just as crushing. Modern leaders envy the power once held by kings, but their burdens are no less formidable. The trappings of success have changed, but the relentless pressures have only shifted form. As the camera slowly pulls away from the CEO's illuminated face to the sprawling, dark cityscape beyond, a quiet question lingers. What did medieval kings endure that we can scarcely imagine today? Their trials were brutal, raw, and immediate. Our own struggles, while different in nature, carry depths of endurance and cost that resonate across centuries. This reflection invites us to reconsider the nature of power and the price paid by those who bear its weight. Medieval kings endured a relentless gauntlet where famine ravaged their lands, plague decimated populations, rebellions simmered on the horizon, and court intrigue wove ever-tightening webs of danger. Every victory was tempered by the looming threat of disaster, each day a precarious balance between survival and collapse. The crown they wore was forged not merely from gold and jewels, but from unyielding crisis and constant peril. Starving peasants pressed against castle gates, towns succumbed to disease without medicine, and the smoke of burning villages stained the horizon, all stark reminders that power came at a brutal cost. Within palace walls, suspicion thrived as poisoned chalices circulated and flatterers masked deadly ambitions. This was a reign shadowed by terror, where the king's triumphs never escaped the weight of impending doom. You will discover the harrowing reality of ruling through crises with no margin for error, how kings managed famines and plagues without modern medicine, relying on fragile resources and desperate measures. Within the court's shadowed halls, paranoia ruled. Threats came not only from enemies outside, but from whispered betrayals within. Taxation was a deadly balancing act, as empty coffers met starving subjects on the brink of revolt, often armed and ready. Behind the spectacle of power lay hidden scars, sleepless nights filled with dread, the physical toll of endless etiquette and ceremony, and the crushing loneliness borne only by those who sat upon the throne. These layers reveal a world where survival demanded far more than strength. It required resilience beyond imagining. Prepare to walk in the boots of a medieval king, stepping through firelit halls thick with whispered threats, onto blood-soaked fields where loyalty was as fragile as life itself. Feel the oppressive weight of a kingdom pressing down with every breath, where every decision could ignite rebellion or preserve fragile peace. Tonight, we bear the burden of the crown, together witnessing not just the power, but the human cost beneath its gleam. The worn pages of a medieval chronicle open to detailed records of famine and crisis, their edges frayed from centuries of handling. Each ink-stained word marks a chapter of suffering and endurance, a testament to lives shaped by hardship. Nearby, in a modern laboratory, scientists carefully examine grain samples from the 14th century, reconstructing the past through microscopic analysis. This juxtaposition reveals how history's scars are etched, not only in parchment but also in seed, connecting us to the tangible realities of medieval life. These ancient grains carry stories of survival and loss, grounding distant events in physical evidence. Through this lens, we begin to understand the fragile world where kings and commoners alike faced relentless challenges. History's scars etched in ink and seed. The Great Famine struck Europe with devastating force, as successive crop failures led to widespread starvation and mortality rates reaching up to 10%. Fields lay barren, unable to sustain the growing population, and peasants struggled to find enough food for survival. Kings confronted impossible choices. What little remained while trying to maintain order among nobles who demanded their share. Grain prices soared while peasant wages stagnated or fell, creating an economic tension that threatened the very fabric of society. The kingdom teetered on the edge of collapse, stretched beyond its limits by forces no ruler could fully control. This period exposed the vulnerability of medieval society to the whims of nature and the harsh realities of subsistence living. A kingdom stretched to breaking. Even the king was not exempt from the hunger that ravaged his lands. Royal tables, typically laden with rich fare, were reduced to meager meals, a symbolic act meant to inspire solidarity and demonstrate shared suffering. Simple porridge replaced lavish feasts, watched closely by anxious courtiers who understood the fragile message. This gesture was as much political as practical, reinforcing the monarch's role as both provider and sufferer alongside his subjects. The crown could not shield its bearer from famine's grasp, yet the king's endurance served as a rallying point for a desperate population clinging to hope. Even the crown could not shield from hunger. The arrival of the Black Death brought an unprecedented catastrophe, wiping out between 30 and 60% of Europe's population. Streets emptied as death spread invisibly, while burial pits grew in size and number. Monarchs issued quarantine orders and established plague hospitals, despite lacking any understanding of contagion or germ theory. Their attempts to contain the disease were desperate improvisations in the face of overwhelming loss. The shadow of death hung over every royal feast, transforming courts into spaces of grief and fear. This crisis tested the limits of medieval governance and exposed the fragile nature of human existence. In an unforgiving world, death shadowed every courtly feast. Royal archives chronicle staggering mortality rates within the nobility, revealing that plague spared no class or rank. Tombstones of prominent figures stand as silent witnesses to the indiscriminate reach of the disease. Portraits faded as entire families were wiped out, leaving power vacuums and political chaos in their wake. No throne was safe from the scourge, and monarchs faced the impossible task of maintaining authority amidst personal loss and societal upheaval. These deaths underscored the vulnerability of even the highest echelons of power to forces beyond human control. No throne was safe from the scourge. Economic pressures mounted as the crown struggled to finance war, recovery, and governance amid shrinking revenues. The imposition of poll taxes ignited popular uprisings, most notably the 1381 Peasants' Revolt, where commoners challenged their lords with newfound boldness. Royal finances deteriorated as coins were debased to stretch resources. Merchants were coerced into forced loans, and chancellery records reveal a chaotic administration. The crown's wealth proved fragile, maintained more by illusion and coercion than by true abundance, revealing the precarious nature of medieval rule. The crown's wealth was a fragile illusion. Recent archaeological analyses have detected traces of arsenic in royal hair samples, suggesting slow poisoning was a common threat within court life. Shared goblets at feasts and chamber pots became potential instruments of lethal intrigue. In an environment rife with suspicion, trust was scarce, and poisonings were a real danger used to eliminate rivals or shift power balances. Court life blended ceremony with danger, where each toast might hide a fatal secret. The spectre of betrayal hovered constantly, reinforcing the precariousness of royal survival. Trust was a luxury few could afford. Kings suffered chronic insomnia, tormented by paranoia and the constant demands of rulership. Historical letters describe stretches of 5 years without a single full night's rest, as anxiety and vigilance eroded health. Modern cortisol studies show that sustained stress shortens lifespan and impairs decision-making, a toll as severe then as it is now. Sleepless nights became another weapon of the crown's burden, wearing down even the strongest rulers and compounding the weight of their responsibilities. The crown demanded sleepless vigilance. Medieval historian Dr. Helena Prescott explains that while the crown conferred authority, it also imposed a near unendurable burden. Monarchs balanced the survival of their kingdoms against threats both external and internal, carrying the weight of their people's fate alongside their own. Their lives were marked by relentless crises, where every choice held profound consequences. This duality shaped rulers who embodied both power and profound vulnerability, revealing the human costs hidden behind regal facades. To rule was to bear endless weight. Epidemiologist Dr. Marcus Leclerc details how royal responses to plague were marked by improvisation and limited knowledge. Without germ theory, quarantine and isolation were imperfect measures, yet failure could mean loss of legitimacy or even the throne itself. Kings faced impossible decisions in real time, managing fear and chaos with fragile tools. These attempts highlight how fragile royal authority was, resting precariously on managing disasters beyond their understanding. A king's fate hung on fragile decisions. In a dimly lit chamber, a poison-stained chalice sits beside a torn ledger of debts, while a peasant's placard pleading for mercy leans nearby. This haunting tableau captures the crown's true cost. Beneath gold and glory lies ruin, sacrifice, and relentless struggle. The crown's shimmer masks a history written in suffering and survival, reminding us that power exacts a price no monarch can escape. Beneath gold and glory lay ruin and sacrifice. As the first pale light breaks over the battlements, torches gutter in the cold morning air, raptors wheel silently high above the stone towers, circling in a calm that belies the coming turmoil. The ancient walls stand resolute, but beneath their shadow, the pulse of a kingdom's unrest begins to quicken. This quiet moment is nature's breath before the storm of a king's day, where every decision holds life or death, peace or war. The stone battlements, worn by centuries, witness the fragile balance between order and chaos, a world poised on the edge of upheaval. King Aldrich moves through his chambers with a weariness that clings to him like his heavy cloak. His face is etched with the weight of sleepless nights and relentless worry, eyes sharp yet bloodshot from constant vigilance. Each furrow in his brow tells a story of burden carried in isolation, his jaw clenched against fatigue. Despite exhaustion, there is a resolute determination as he surveys his domain from the high windows, aware that the stability of his kingdom depends on him alone. Aldrich embodies the tension between duty and dread that defines his reign. Queen Matilda stands quietly by a window, her gaze distant and somber. She carries the heavy burden of diplomatic negotiations and the personal grief of lost children, their memory lingering in the weight of her mourning jewelry. The lines of tension around her eyes reflect countless court intrigues and the delicate balance she maintains between compassion and political necessity. Behind her calm exterior lies a woman shaped by sorrow and strength, navigating the treacherous waters of royal life with measured grace and unwavering resolve. Sir Eamon moves with cautious authority, a figure caught between loyalty and fear. His whispered counsel to the king carries the weight of survival in a world of shifting alliances and hidden threats. His hesitant glances betray the tension underlying every decision, aware that a single misstep could mean ruin. In the shadows of the court, Eamon negotiates the dangerous balance of power. His heavy sighs echoing the relentless pressure to maintain order amid uncertainty. Rowan the jester wears a thin mask of forced smiles and nervous laughter, a fragile relief against the dark realities surrounding him. His jokes carry a bitter edge, hinting at truths too dangerous to speak outright. Amid flickering candlelight, his presence lightens the mood, but cannot dispel the undercurrent of fear and despair. Rowan's humor is a survival mechanism, a delicate thread of levity woven through the harsh fabric of court life. In a sleek glass office high above the city, a modern CEO sits in silent reflection. The bright city lights outside contrast sharply with the quiet intensity in his eyes. His posture mirrors that of a weary king, bearing invisible burdens of responsibility and stress. As he gazes through the window, the timeless nature of leadership challenges becomes clear. The pressure to lead with strength and resolve remains. He is a silent witness, bridging centuries of power and its costs. At 4 a.m., Aldrich summons his advisors by torchlight. The flickering flames cast long shadows across anxious faces as farmers plead for relief from famine. While lords demand preparations for war, every word is measured carefully. The slightest misstep could ignite rebellion or fracture alliances. The air is thick with tension, the weight of impossible choices settling over the council like a shroud. This meeting sets the tone for a day where diplomacy and power collide under the relentless gaze of duty. Between 6 and 9 a.m., the royal hall fills with petitions. Widows of plague victims plead for justice. Nobles press for retribution over slain serfs. Aldrich listens, his judgments swift and harsh. Sentences of lynching and property forfeiture are handed down with grim resolve. Ink-stained hands signing decrees that blend blood and law. The echoes of desperation and authority mingle, the fragile balance of justice and fear maintained through ruthless decisions. Each verdict weighs heavily, shaping the fate of his realm and testing his resolve. The midday banquet is a study in tension. Elaborate dishes of mead and spiced meats fill the table, yet eyes dart nervously as the royal taster samples each offering. A sick taster's sudden flight sends a ripple of fear through the court. Aldrich himself eats sparingly, choosing plain bread soaked in broth, a symbolic act of fortitude amid uncertainty. The feast becomes a theater of suspicion and resilience, where every bite is weighed against the shadow of treachery. In the muddy afternoon, Aldrich rides out to inspect tax collections. Peasants glare with barely concealed hostility, pitchforks poised beneath watchful eyes. Sir Eamon negotiates quietly with soldiers, persuading restraint. Aldrich, aware of political optics, forgives minor arrears as a gesture of mercy. Carefully staged, act to calm unrest. The dusty roads and tense faces tell a story of fragile peace maintained by a ruler balancing firmness with calculated grace. The Privy Council meets in a cramped solar beneath low ceilings. Whispers of secret deals and foreign alliances fill the air. Queen Matilda confides in Aldrich. His brother plots with the French. The revelation tightens the room's atmosphere. Aldrich's hand rests on his dagger, eyes scanning shadowed faces for threats. Alliances and betrayals weave a dangerous web, where trust is scarce and vigilance essential. The king's world narrows to the cold certainty of impending conflict. Sleep evades Aldrich, haunted by distant cries from the plague hospital beyond the walls. Rowan's jests attempt to pierce the darkness, but the laughter rings hollow in the vast chambers. A sudden knock at midnight shatters the uneasy calm. A messenger warns of a border incursion. Exhaustion surrenders to fury. As the king prepares once more to defend his realm, the relentless demands of power stretching into the dead of night, the sharp clatter of spurs echoes through the stone corridors. punctuating moments of tension and urgency. This metallic rhythm serves as a constant reminder of the ever-present threat of violence and the readiness demanded of those who serve the crown. The sound reverberates, underscoring the fragile order maintained by force and discipline within the castle's walls. The air near the infirmary is thick with the acrid smell of disease and decay. Dim corridors hold the moans of the sick and dying. Damp stone walls, absorbing suffering and despair. This pervasive stench serves as a harsh reminder of mortality's shadow over the kingdom, where care and contagion walk hand in hand, and the health of the realm is as fragile as the breath of its people. Torch smoke curls and flickers, stinging eyes and lungs as it mingles with the cold night air. This persistent irritant adds a physical discomfort to the emotional weight borne by those within the castle. Tears are blinked away, coughs suppressed, as the harsh environment becomes another trial in a day, marked by relentless strain. Alone on the ramparts beneath a blood-red moon, Aldrich stands silhouetted against the darkened sky. The silence is profound, broken only by the distant howls of night creatures and the cold wind across stone battlements. In this isolation, the king bears the full weight of his kingdom's chaos and uncertainty. His solitary vigil embodies the loneliness of power and the heavy cost of leadership in a world fraught with peril. As dark clouds gather overhead, Aldrich remains steadfast, the embodiment of a king of ruin, amid crumbling realms. The slow fade to black underscores the relentless dread and unyielding burden carried beneath the crown. In this twilight moment, the cost of power is made unmistakably clear. Every crown conceals a curse, and every throne demands sacrifice. In every crown lies accursed the cost of power. The fading tapestries that line the throne room once proudly depicted victorious conquests and the king's might, now moth-eaten and threadbare. They reveal a stark contrast between the grandeur of power and its fragile foundation. The rich imagery of battle and dominion flickers in the torchlight, shadows dancing over tattered fabric. These remnants symbolize the transient nature of royal authority celebrated in its time, yet slowly unraveled by the passage of years, betrayal, and the harsh realities behind the throne. Power, once bright and bold, is quietly worn thin by history's relentless march. Portraits of sainted kings hang solemnly amid stone walls, stained with the blood of countless battles and betrayals. The serene faces of revered rulers contrast sharply with the grim reminders of mortal violence etched into the very fabric of the castle. This juxtaposition captures the paradox of medieval kingship, ordained by divine right yet vulnerable to human cruelty. Sacred duty intertwined with mortal danger, where sanctity and savagery lived side by side within these walls. The crown was both a symbol of heavenly favor and a target for earthly wrath. The medieval king ruled as God's anointed, vested with mythic authority that demanded absolute obedience, yet alongside this blessing came a constant awareness of divine judgment. Chronicles of comets blazing across the sky or eclipses darkening the sun were interpreted as ominous signs, warnings that the heavens themselves watched and weighed the monarch's deeds. Courtiers and monks recorded these portents anxiously, heightening paranoia and fear. The crown was both a sacred gift and a heavy burden, blessed by heaven but cursed by its unyielding scrutiny. Protocol forbade genuine emotional intimacy, even within the royal bedchamber, where the Queen's presence was as much political theatre as partnership. The king's closest relationships were guarded, measured, and fraught with suspicion. Chronic loneliness became an inescapable companion, breeding paranoia where every confidant might secretly harbor betrayal. The isolation of power created a psychological prison, separating the monarch from those he ruled, and leaving him vulnerable to both external enemies and inner doubt. The higher the throne, the deeper the solitude. Ceremonies of investiture and courtly pageants were carefully orchestrated spectacles, designed to inspire loyalty and affirm the king's divine status. These public displays reinforced authority, but also humbled the monarch, reminding all that even kings answered to God and the people. During times of famine or unrest, kings might perform public acts of penance, whipping themselves in the town square to display solidarity with their subjects. Such acts were double-edged. While fostering connection, they also exposed vulnerability, risking humiliation as well as respect. Power was wielded through ritual, spectacle, and sacrifice. The threat of usurpation haunted the royal family endlessly. Every birth was celebrated cautiously. Every death mourned as a potential crisis. Modern psychological studies identify this persistent dread as heir trauma, a fear that gnaws away at health and longevity. For medieval kings, the survival of their lineage was as critical as their own, creating a pressure cooker of anxiety that could shorten lives and fracture reigns. Succession was not merely a family matter but a matter of kingdom survival, laden with mortal peril and psychological torment. Medieval kings lived in gilded cages, powerful yet utterly isolated. Dr. Sigrid Thorson explains that expectation and constant vigilance trapped monarchs in a life of contradiction, commanding vast realms but confined by the demands of their role. The throne was a symbol of supreme authority, but also a prison of relentless scrutiny and unyielding responsibility. The king's freedom was curtailed by ceremony, protocol, and fear, leaving him powerful but profoundly alone amid his court's machinations. Historian Professor Jonas Weber reflects on how the royal ego found no sanctuary. The king was too exalted to mingle freely with his subjects, yet too visible to escape enemies' eyes. Every public appearance was a test, every private moment shadowed by suspicion. This constant exposure bred a fragile psyche, where omnipotence was paired with profound vulnerability. The monarch's identity was bound up in a role that allowed no retreat, no refuge from the pressures and dangers of rule. The paradox of power created a relentless internal battle. Kings needed to project strength and infallibility, even as they feared betrayal and downfall. Suspicion permeated their thoughts, whispering conspiracies that blurred the line between reality and paranoia. The mind of the ruler was a battlefield, torn between the need for control and the awareness of ever-present threats. This psychological warfare shaped their every decision, leaving them locked in a state of perpetual vigilance. Acts of public penance, including self-whipping or displays of humility, served as potent political theater. These rituals reinforced the king's authority by demonstrating submission to God and solidarity with his subjects. Even while exposing his vulnerability, crowds gathered to witness such spectacles, their reactions ranging from ADO to skepticism. This complex performance wielded humiliation as a double-edged sword, both a tool to command respect and a reminder of the limits imposed even on the most powerful. The crown bestowed omnipotence, but also omnipresent peril. Beneath the gilded surface lay a mind forever at war with itself, balancing divine right against mortal threat, authority against isolation. The king's true battle was often internal, fought in shadows of doubt and fear as much as on fields of conquest. The empty throne, bathed in flickering candlelight, symbolizes a power both majestic and tragic, a testament to the enduring cost of sovereignty. A sealed royal edict rests beside a gauntlet stained with fresh blood, stark symbols of law enforced with brutal finality. The wax seal breaks beneath the weight of authority, while droplets of blood glisten coldly on the iron. This juxtaposition of ink and iron reveals a governance where words on parchment carried the same force as sharpened steel. Justice was swift and merciless, and the king's commands echoed through courts and battlefields alike. Power was wielded not only by sword but by decree, its reach extending into every corner of the realm. Hidden networks of informants threaded through taverns, monasteries, and courts, weaving webs of surveillance and rumor. Tavern wenches whispered secrets to cloaked figures, disgraced knights passed folded letters beneath doors, and monks exchanged furtive glances behind stone cell walls. Eyes and ears were everywhere, each whisper potentially sealing a fate. This shadowy machinery kept the king informed and his enemies exposed, turning rumor into a tool of control. The crown's vigilance extended beyond armies into the very conversations of its subjects. Middlemen charged exorbitant rents to collect taxes, flooding royal coffers but igniting peasant fury. Maintaining power required the monarch to alternate between violent repression and calculated clemency. Public acts of mercy quelled unrest, while executions and punishments reminded all of the crown's reach. Scenes of courtly mercy were staged carefully, often near grim execution grounds, underscoring the fragile peace between fear and favor. The king's authority depended on this balance, showing strength without tipping into rebellion, wielding mercy as a tool of political strategy. Public trials of minor nobles served as royal theatre justice, performed before crowds. Prisoners shackled and pleading guilty under torture, verdicts predetermined to instill fear. These spectacles reinforced the king's dominance, turning courtroom into stage where power was dramatized. The message was clear. Dissent invited ruin. Law was less about fairness than performance, designed to maintain order through spectacle and intimidation. Some letters were never sent, and false rumors seeded deliberately to flush out dissent. Scribes altered documents in shadowed chambers, while whispered conspiracies fanned paranoia. Truth became malleable, twisted into a weapon to control hearts and minds. Marriages sealed temporary truces, their human cost often overlooked in the calculus of diplomacy. Betrayal within royal families was common and often brutal. Alliances shattered without warning, blood spilled to preserve or extend power. Secret meetings bred conspiracies, family loyalty, a fragile currency readily spent. Kinship bonds were subordinate to political survival, with treachery accepted as part of the game. Trust was scarce, and the palace walls echoed with whispered plots. Political sociologist Dr. Leif Gunnarsson explains that a king's power rested less on sword and army than on ruling through fear of famine, exile, and execution. This psychological grip held kingdoms together, a reminder that obedience was often born of dread rather than loyalty. Fear became a currency the crown spent liberally to maintain control. Monastic chronicler Dame Imelda reflects on the monarch's use of mercy as a calculated tool, with punishments carefully staged performances to reinforce power. Compassion and cruelty were entwined, each reinforcing the other in a governance balancing on the knife's edge between order and chaos. The Crown's mercy was neither unconditional nor purely benevolent, it was governance by design. The chaotic roar of a Wall Street trading floor pulses with urgency, mirrored by the clamorous uproar of a medieval market riot. Traders shout over flashing screens, their fingers flying across keyboards. On the other side, peasants clash in a swirl of dust and fury beneath castle walls. Though centuries apart, both scenes reveal power's unchanging chorus stage, where tension fuels every move. Markets crash as swords clash, and fortunes shift in moments. Power's arena is ever fraught, where the stakes are survival, dominance, and control. The echoes of ancient turmoil resonate in today's financial battlegrounds, reminding us that history's rhythms persist beneath modern facades. Boardrooms resonate with whispered betrayals, rivalries, and shifting alliances, reflecting the same high-stakes games once played in feudal courts. Hostile takeovers mimic the violent upheavals of baronial coups, where trust is fragile and power transient. Negotiations over contracts echo treaty talks, strategic firings replace assassinations. Though suits have replaced armor, the game remains unchanged only. The players differ. Each faction seeks advantage, guarding secrets while probing for weakness. Today's executive burnout rates alarmingly mirror the mortality statistics of medieval royalty. Chronic stress, sleepless nights, and isolation remain constant companions to power. Pale faces glare from office windows, just as faded royal portraits once hung in stone halls. The psychological and physical toll of leadership has not diminished. It has simply evolved in form. Whether beneath a crown or a corporate logo, the weight of responsibility exacts a steep price. These enduring parallels underscore how the burdens of leadership transcend time, challenging even the strongest to endure. Whistleblowers emerge as modern-day rebel barons, threatening the oligarchic order with exposed secrets. Government fines act as contemporary royal forfeitures, using financial pressure to maintain control. Courts and protesters, like medieval executions and uprisings, test the stability of power structures. These pressures compel those at the top to constantly navigate threats both internal and external. The dynamics of revolt and repression persist, demonstrating that governance. Organizational psychologist Dr. Emma Clark explains that the toll of power is often hidden, paid in sleepless nights and fractured alliances. Behind every executive title lies unseen sacrifice, a constant vigilance against threats both real and perceived. The psychological burden includes managing suspicion, maintaining composure, and sustaining relationships under pressure. Power's demands extend beyond strategy and decision, embedding deeply into the mental and emotional fabric of leaders. This hidden cost is a universal truth, bridging eras and roles. Economist Professor Navin Patel reflects that modern leaders can learn much from medieval kings, particularly the importance of transparency and empathy. These qualities temper fear and foster genuine loyalty, strengthening the bonds between ruler and ruled. Medieval courts were rife with paranoia, but those monarchs who balanced authority with understanding maintained more stable reigns. Today's leaders face similar challenges, balancing control with compassion to navigate complex human dynamics. The lessons of history remind us that leadership is timeless, shaped by enduring human needs and vulnerabilities. Feudal hierarchies and corporate structures share a fundamental reliance on loyalty, fear, and calculated generosity. Chains binding vassals, echo cubicles confining employees. Both systems enforce order through hierarchical relationships and reciprocal obligations. Power's architecture remains constant, built on the uneasy tension between authority and subservience. Leaders must navigate complex social contracts, distributing favors and enforcing discipline to maintain cohesion. This continuity reveals that despite technological advances, human dynamics at the heart of power persists across centuries and cultures. Leadership often means walking a solitary path, burdened by paranoia, isolation, and relentless pressure to perform flawlessly. Close-ups reveal faces marked by worry and fatigue. Solitary walks through dim corridors reflect internal struggles. The higher the station, the thinner the veil separating public image from private anxiety. Leaders must conceal doubts while projecting strength, enduring constant scrutiny and betrayal fears. This emotional weight is a shared experience across history, underscoring leadership as an isolating and demanding role. Aldrich's ancient crown slowly dissolves into the sleek logo of a multinational corporation, bridging medieval monarchy and modern enterprise. Flickering torchlight fades into the cold glow of a smartphone screen set to Do Not Disturb. The seamless transition reminds us that despite eras and technologies, the burden of power endures an unbroken chain, linking past rulers to today's executives. In every age, authority demands sacrifice, vigilance, and resilience, shaping lives and histories with equal force. The legacy of power's weight is universal and timeless. Return to the battered throne room where we began. Rain-soaked banners hang limp, and golden chairs sit empty, their once bright gleam dulled by time and neglect. The stones beneath are worn smooth by footsteps of rulers long gone, and the distant rumble of thunder reminds us that power's foundation is as fragile as the weathered walls surrounding it. From blood-soaked battlefields to gleaming boardroom floors, the weight of the crown has always crushed ambition and humanity alike, leaving behind echoes of glory and ruin. King Aldrich slowly removes his crown, his fingers trembling as he presses the heavy circlet to his chest. In this intimate moment, the burden of years of endless wars, betrayals, and sleepless nights seems almost unbearable. With a final, desperate gesture, he casts the crown into the moat below. The metal sinks beneath rippling water, breaking the silence, as if releasing him from the chains that bound his soul. Even the mightiest seek freedom from their burdens, though it may come at a steep price. Cut to a modern CEO closing a sleek laptop, the glow of the screen fading to black. Rising from a polished desk, he steps outside into the bright sunlight, taking a deep, steady breath. Alone but unshackled, he moves forward beyond the invisible prisons of deadlines, expectations, and ceaseless scrutiny. Though the walls have changed from stone battlements To glass towers, the desire to be free, to shed the weight of power, remains universal and timeless. Power's price endures across centuries. Titles may shift, kingdoms may fall, but the torment it demands is constant. The true lesson of the medieval king is clear. No throne, no matter how gilded, is worth the suffering it requires. What burdens will you carry or choose to cast aside in your own pursuit of power? As the crown sinks beneath the still surface of the moat and dawn breaks over quiet waters, the question lingers waiting for your answer.